since I've started following you, you're not, how do you say it, like data driven or science first. Experiment, you go experience first.
Yeah.
Data metrics second. And I'm quite interested to know like how you manage. Do you track? And I think some people get caught up and a bit kind of bogged down in data and in kind of, you know, research that's 10 years too late. And actually it's nice to hear from people that are at the forefront of a training modality that's niche.
Yeah.
And I really love the people that push toward being, you know, a quote unquote weirdo, which is like, not calling you a weirdo, but I
you wouldn't be the first, and I hope you're not the last.
And I'd love to kind of dive into that kind of, I guess, aura in the way of like, okay, a lot of people choose not to do certain things because they feel like it's outcasting them, especially in the training world. It's like all about trends. It's all about copying X, Y, and Z. And I'm really interested in this series in particular is talking to people that are doing things that are not so similar to the norm and are breaking certain things down and actually going, well, I think this. And one of the issues I find with social media is that people don't put what I think out. They put what they've seen other people do out.
Yeah.
And it's a constant echo chamber of people just repeating the same 3 top tips for X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And it's not, here's my theory, here's what I've experienced, here's an open discussion. And I'm hoping through today we can kind of move a bit towards that direction, just kind of see what comes up from your perspective.
Totally.
That's cool. Yeah.
Awesome. Let's do it.
So let's go maybe right back to the beginning. As a child, were you at all physical, or were you, you know, what was the situation there?
Yeah, I was pretty much the opposite, the antithesis of a sporty or a physical child in any way. I did not enjoy or indeed excel in any sort of physical endeavor for my entire childhood up until my mid-teens when I started jiu-jitsu. So I didn't have the build or frame or, you know, there's a very important couple of years pre-puberty, especially, where what you're doing from sort of 4, 5, 6 up into about 11 or 12 lays a really strong foundation for your physicality in the future. And I just skipped all of that. And that wasn't, you know, my parents were very supportive of anything I wanted to do. They took me to the clubs, but I just had no interest in it, I guess. Which looking back now, it's, you know, the scene in Interstellar where he's like banging on the, you know, the intergalactic wall.
Yeah.
And he's trying this. Yeah. That's me banging on the wall, telling my 6-year-old self to like go do gymnastics or something.
Oh man. So what were you doing with your time? Were you at all physical, or were you just kind of hanging out?
No, not at all. Not at all. No, I didn't really care for sports. I never, I guess is the big one. I never was drawn to team sports. There was something inherently that I didn't like about the fact that if you won, it was shared, and you could lose without it being your fault, and that sort of whole thing. So most of the sports that you play as a kid in the UK, it's football, right? So I was never in the football. A little bit older, when I went to secondary school, it was rugby, but I was never in the rugby. Yeah, I just really didn't do anything. And then people ask me, well, what did you do? And the short answer is I have no idea. I think I watched TV and ate biscuits.
Hung out. Yeah.
Yeah,
the good life.
Yeah, it sounds all right now when you talk about it.
Yeah, right. So then what was it about? Was it BJJ, was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or was it, what kind of style of JJ Jiu-Jitsu did you first?
Which J did I J? Yeah. So, I mean, I was interested in martial arts from a relatively young age. I think it was, I think I watched like Dragon Ball Z whilst I was on holiday in America, and it was on TV, like the original one. Not Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball, with Kid Goku. And I remember watching that and I thought, damn, that's cool. I want to do some of this stuff. And so I had a real interest in martial arts. My parents weren't particularly, or my mum especially, was not particularly keen on me doing any martial arts. But I'd say when I was in my early teens, I began going to various martial arts gyms, some for a single session, some for a couple of weeks, some for a couple of months. But none of them really stuck for longer than 3 or 4 months. When I was about 14 or 15, again, I tried another one, and it was a Japanese jiu-jitsu, like traditional jiu-jitsu gym called Mill Hill Jiu-Jitsu Club. And that was, at the time, it was pure jiu-jitsu. I started training there. And I was training there for about 4 or 5 months. And I was enjoying it, but I don't think I was enjoying it that much. I think the big sort of that perfect, kairos, that sort of the Greek idea of like that time in that moment. I think that moment for me was the fact that even though I wasn't particularly engaged by Japanese jiu-jitsu, I was in that intermediate sort of liminal age where I was too old for a kids class, but I was right at the bottom age-wise of an adult class. So I was 14, hanging out with adults, and I think I just liked being there. I was the only kid there. There were no kids classes. Like, it was just me and a bunch of like 20, 30, 40-year-old guys. So I think I stuck around that for that more than anything, more than the fact that I enjoyed the actual sport I was doing. About 6 months after I started, one of the instructors left, and the other instructor took over, who at the time had started training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu already. So he would go to the Japanese Jiu-Jitsu class, but he wouldn't do any of it. Because once you see the light of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you're talking about real fighting, It's that moment, that epiphany where you realize that everything else is a complete waste of time. So he would go to the gym during class time, but he would just do Jiu-Jitsu, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the corner. And eventually when the other instructor left, Nick Brooks took over, and then slowly he turned the gym from Japanese Jiu-Jitsu to pure Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That's where I trained, up until to a degree now, you could say. But I left, a lot of things changed over COVID. But up until COVID, that's where I trained through, competed for, and got my black belt from.
Oh, wow. Amazing. Going back just a small step. So you said, I stayed for that. I'd love to just dig a bit deeper into what exactly was it about being a 14-year-old training with 30 to 40-year-olds that was really engaging? Was it the progression arc? Was it the challenge?
No, I think when you're when you're old, you just want to be young, and when you're young, you just want to be older, right? And I think that being around older men, it makes you stand up a little bit taller, makes you lock in a little bit more. They say that, what's the saying? You're the amalgam of the 5 people you spend the most amount of time with. And if you're hanging around with 5 14-year-old boys who are, doing whatever 14-year-old boys do, that's different than if you're spending time with older men, and you can, you step up your game a little bit. So I felt that really matured me as an individual. And I credit that specific fact for a lot of what I was able to do, in my mid and late teens.
Yeah, nice.
Because there's not many. There's not many opportunities for a 14 or 15-year-old boy to be brought in and kind of treated like an equal with a bunch of older men. There's very few opportunities. You're still, any younger. Like I said, there was that moment. If I was 12 or 13 being introduced to Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, and I had to find a kids class, I think it would have gone the same way as all the others. And indeed, if I was 20, it wouldn't have had that unique pull to me. So it was the fact that it was that perfect timing of that age.
Yeah. I think that's where BJJ and other sports, for me, arm wrestling right now, that has such quality, is the ability to have older generations still active in a sport. If you look at things like mainstream team sports, football, rugby, usually the older generations have dropped off by 30, 35 years old. And so there's no real role models that are actively, being physical with the younger generation. I think it's so special. Climbing is another example. You can go out climb, 50, 60, 70 years old. And I think that's a really positively impactful part of something like BJJ. It's obviously from a lay person's point of view, I've not done too much BJJ. It's a hyper intellectualized sport.
Yes.
It's a bit different to something like football, where there's tactics, but there's the jogo bonito, there's the flair, there's the improvisational kind of quality that maybe some people miss in BJJ. And I'm interested, from your perspective, you don't strike me as someone that's hyper intellectual, but would you say your style is more improvised? Is it more technical? How do you approach it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that the idea that jiu-jitsu is has to be intellectual is really wrong, and possibly even damaging to the sport. And this is not an assertion that you're making. This is absolutely something that is almost stereotypical to it. It's seen as human chess, and it's the cerebral thing. It's for nerds and all of that stuff. And jiu-jitsu it's very is very unconstrained. It's almost limitless in a way that almost the very few sports are. So arm wrestling's a really good example of you can look at you can make a very interesting debate as to arm wrestling being a combat sport. It's not really. But in a way you're wrestling, but you're only wrestling with the arm. Now obviously
Well, I think
to
it's
the
a
layman,
hyper-constrained wrestle.
It's a very
in the same way
wrestle.
that BJJ is maybe unconstrained.
Yeah, exactly. And almost any other form of wrestling, like when I say jiu-jitsu, like pure grappling, submission grappling, is by far the most unconstrained rule set of a non-striking one-on-one combat sport. You will find some rules, some events where you can basically do anything grappling wise. There's Greco-Roman, you can't grab below the waist, and in other wrestling styles, you can't grab the head without having an arm on the inside. And if you pin them for 3 seconds, it's done. And, with grappling, you sort of just go and you stop when someone quits. So it is incredibly broad. And what comes with that broadness is the ability to, like in anything, you take something, you take the universe and you can look up at the stars and you can marvel at its beauty, or you can look through a telescope and work out how many light years away this thing is, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can intellectualize jiu-jitsu as much as you like, but because it's so limitless, that intellectualization becomes limitless. But it's not necessary at all, No. And it's a funny thing because, and again, talking about like grappling and sort of over intellectualizing it. I'm in Rome at the moment as we speak. I was in Athens a couple of days ago, and one of the things that have really stuck out to me as I've been traveling around, going to museums and stuff like that. I posted a picture a few days ago of one of the metopes, one of the statues from the Parthenon in Athens, and on the south side of the Parthenon, there's 32 metopes, I think, 32 statues, all depicting this battle between centaurs and humans. And a lot of them are in grappling positions. I posted a picture of one of them. One of the most well-preserved metopes is this centaur doing a one-handed guillotine, which is a very popular choke and like a position that, one of my favorite position that I'm known for, doing the centaur doing this technique onto a human. And you look at that and you go, damn, like this shit it's been around for thousands of years. This is innate. They weren't intellectualizing it then. They just knew it was a thing. And then yesterday I was in the Vatican Museum and they have some relief sculptures depicting the same thing. And it was so crazy. I walk in, I see these these 4 images lined up next to each other on this same block. And it's a centaur doing a heel hook. I'm not fucking kidding you. He's doing a goddamn heel hook. Like, you look at it, you're like, he is obviously doing a heel hook. One of them is doing a guillotine. He's both hands locked in and he's like arching backwards trying to finish it. It could almost be like the follow-up picture of that initial one I did. And then on the other one, there's a human doing a Kimura on a centaur. And you look at it, and if you do grappling, you're like, this is not a scramble that's accent. Like, that is a heel hook. Or, that is a leg lock. That is a guillotine choke. And that is a Kimura. And there's no doubt about it. You know what I mean? So this is something that is inherently emergent from the human anatomy. So when you have something like that, you can find videos of kangaroos doing rear naked chokes. Like, it can't be that intellectual.
Yeah, I mean? Yeah. It's true.
Yeah.
I like the word emergent. I feel like from the outside, there's been a huge push towards almost task-based learning
Yeah.
and trying to bring a lot of schools of BJJ away from kind of over-intellectualized learning and pushing people more towards these emergent qualities and process of learning that they try to allow things to emerge as opposed to forcing it in and you know, put your left thumb there, put your pinky there. And I wonder, when you're teaching seminars or when you're rolling yourself, do you have a leaning towards an emergent practice, an emerging teaching style, or do you go a bit more nitty gritty and detail oriented, or what's the balance there?
Yeah. So for me, I've always been a huge proponent of live training. You know, that's when really you integrate. You know, that's when you develop the skills, and that's what it's all about. For me, it's less about techniques and more about positions and concepts to move into and out of and through those different positions. Focusing on techniques. It's about where you're going, not about how you get there. You just you can find the way to get there, but you've got to know where you're going. I think that the problem with the pure constraint-led approach, even though I believe that is the way to develop skills best, is that the intellectualization that we see often in jiu-jitsu when people are going very detailed on certain things, that doesn't necessarily help someone learn that skill. But learning a skill is not the only important thing when it comes to teaching. You know, something that's even more important in teaching is engaging with the person that you are teaching. You know, it's actually not what's optimal. It's the emotional investment, it's the interest, it's the engagement. And I find that if you do it well, going into details about stuff can pull someone more emotionally involved, you know, engaged into what you're showing, which then when they do move into something that's more live, there is more interest and there's more engagement there. I think it was I can't remember the name of the author. I think it was the Talent Code, where they
Erickson, maybe? No,
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was that book where he talks about, or some book I read last year. They were talking about like the best indicator of how far someone will go in whatever sport they were talking about is like they ask them, you know, will you be doing this in 10 years? And the people who went, maybe. And you know, they didn't do as well. They weren't as good as the people who went 100%. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. So actually the emotional investment into what you're doing is something that I think is really underrated as a longer term tool for skill acquisition and just longevity in the sport.
Yeah, I love it. We talk a lot on this podcast about resonance. It's of course a bit of a woo-woo term, but there's something there in just kind of vibing with someone, getting the
100%.
emotional content across to let people hook into something and then go through the nitty-gritty. And without that emotional hook, it's really hard to be dedicated into something. And it kind of segues quite nicely into my next question, which was, go back to when Dan was, you know, 14 to 20, let's say, in the first kind of 4 or 5 years. Did you have a feeling of, hell yeah, I'm in this, I'm going to be a black belt, I'm seeing myself reaching the top of this sport? Or were you just kind of going along as any other teenager would, just kind of fumbling through?
No, I was obsessed with it as soon as I started it. As soon as I started grappling and I knew what I was doing. And, you know, I was watching the UFC at the same time. And again, I was in this privileged position to be the youngest in the class. And I was very lucky to, and this is, you know, you get onto the next thing where you're talking about the importance of teachers and mentors. And, you know, you look at some of the highest performing athletes in the world and high performers in non-athletic endeavors as well. And you ask them, you know, who's the most important people in your life? They'll be like, oh, my physics teacher from 3rd grade, who was the first person in my life who believed in me. And, you know, you hear this story all the time. And for me, that person was Nick Brooks, who, I was young. He saw something in me. He was a very generous person. He went out of his way for a lot of people, and I was lucky that he took me under his wing. He would drive me to tournaments. He would drive me to training sessions. And when someone else believes in you, it doubles down, it echoes, but it gets, you believe in yourself, but they believe in you, and it goes back to you. And then, that's when you
almost.
really, it's a mirror. And for me, that was a massive part of what, again, we go back to that emotional investment. That was a big part of it for me. So yeah, I fell in love with the sport pretty fast, and that's all I thought about. It's all I wanted to do. I was at school at the time, and then at college afterwards, and people would be doing work, and I'd be talking, okay, what I'd be doing spider charts, what techniques I can do from which positions and stuff like that. So yeah, I lost interest in everything else. Just wanted to do jiu-jitsu.
Obviously, back then, financial gain wasn't really a part of the sport. It's still not really part of the sport. I think Craig Jones is trying to help that, but there's obviously, there's been a stutter comparative to other combat sports, and especially the UFC was driving forward. Was there ever a thought from yourself or from your family of like, what's the career here? Or was it just pure love and focus?
Yeah, well, a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid does not give a shit about money. Parents slightly more concerned, but I pretty much wouldn't listen to anything they said, and I was just like, this is what I'm going to do. No, you're 100% right. There was, I guess, the goal always for someone who is still kind of, if you want to make money doing jiu-jitsu, unless you're a really, really, really high-level athlete, is you're going to open a gym. So that was the intention down the way. But when you're that young, you're not thinking about stuff like that. You're thinking about only being the best in the world. That's what you care about.
Yeah, right.
Who cares about money? I want glory. That's what.
Yeah. So before we started recording, we mentioned Luke Trainer, a kind of mutual friend of ours, and he's quite specific in his goal setting and how he goes about fights, and kind of writes them on a whiteboard. Has a quite a specific way of doing his goals and the timeline. And I wonder, before you started to compete internationally, before you got your black belt, did you have a specific goal? And then how did that change through your career?
No, I love Luke's stuff. He's got the whiteboard. He writes the goals down. He's manifesting, he's visualizing, he's laws of attraction, he's all of that stuff. No, I didn't do any of that stuff. I just trained and competed and on to the next one. Yeah, it was a lot more not less thoughtful. It's probably a poor choice of words, but you get the idea. Yeah, I wasn't doing all the stuff that Luke was, but I do love that stuff. It was emergent, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously, adjacent to BJJ, the growth of the UFC was happening. Was there ever a conversation? Was it ever on the cards that you might move towards striking and actually trying to go full MMA into the UFC?
Yeah. I mean, that was my goal from when I started. So I started jiu-jitsu at like 15, and I was watching UFC around about that time. I was like, okay, I'm going to be a UFC champion. So I was telling people I wanted to be a UFC champion. Yeah, of course. And I think the deal that was made with my family, I believe, is that I could start doing striking when I turned 18. So, get a good base in grappling and start striking when I turned 18. And essentially what happened is after 3 or so years of grappling training and success in competitions, when I got to 18, I was less willing to take my focus away from grappling. So I just put that on the back burner, and I focused more on the grappling, and it kind of continued like that. I was, I'm 21 now. Okay, let's do a kickboxing class, and then, I'd hit a few pads and go, nah, I prefer the grappling stuff. So I never did it. And in hindsight, very glad that I never did it. Very glad.
Really? What, can I ask why?
It's a really brutal sport. It's a tough game. It's a really tough game, MMA. I think any striking sport, boxing, Thai boxing, any full contact striking art, you've got to weigh up the benefits to the costs. there's a lot more costs, which come in the form of brain damage, essentially. So in hindsight, and this was sort of, I became even more aware. I by the time I was in my late 20s, I was fully aware of this, and I had no desire to really do. Maybe I was in my late 20s. Okay, I'll train for one MMA fight and have a one MMA fight, and then I can say that I did it. And as I got a little bit older, and when I started working for Cage Rise in 2020, so just before I turned 30, and that's Europe's biggest MMA organization, and I was able to see the sport much more up close and personal. And since doing that, now I'm sort of even more doubled down and happy that I never got in there, even though I have huge respect to the people who do. I think that MMA is the greatest sport in the world, but I don't want to do it. Don't want the brain damage.
Respect.
Yeah.
So let's go to your competitive career, because I'd love to hear a bit about kind of Polaris events and kind of what went on there. So can you remember your first, let's call it international event?
Yeah, I can remember. Yeah, I can remember the first international event I did, I think, was Europeans, juvenile. I was 16 at the time, I think.
Oh, so super.
Yeah. I started competing at 15, I think. I went to Europeans when I was 16, did juvenile. I can't remember how I got on. I think I came second. It was okay. I fought some Polish kid who was just a bit, I can't remember his name.
Hooked you or something?
It's like, no, thankfully not. And then when I was 17, I went to the first ever World No-Gi Championship. Again, juvenile division, just two of us, but I won. So I became juvenile world champion at blue belt, cool. which of course it's a nothing. It's nice when you're a blue belt kid and then but the next, a month later I was in adult and it doesn't matter anymore. I competed a lot. I did Europeans multiple times. I went to Brazil when I was 17 and competed at adult at blue belt adult in Brazil, which is an experience everyone has to do at some point. And I won the Rio State Open there. That was cool. Definitely a highlight competitive wise. They don't want the gringo to win. So that was 5 fights to win, I think, and they were not happy for me to take medals home. They were like, it was one group of us who were from the UK. This was back in the day where people were not going to Brazil to compete, really, especially from the UK. So that was cool. And I was pretty active competitively, especially in my late teens and early 20s.
Coming from a childhood of non-competitive activity, let's call biscuit eating. What was the process like of you diving into competition? Was it a weird thing? Did you have to turn it on? Did you have that inside you? What was that like?
Yeah, good question. I think even though I wasn't very sporty as a kid, I was competitive, very competitive, overly competitive, probably, some people would say. I think that was from my dad. My dad, whenever we'd play games, he'd always fuck us up, like, it doesn't matter what we're playing cards or Monopoly or we're playing pool or, whatever, tennis. Yeah, like he wouldn't give, he'd beat us. And I think that that makes you fight harder for it. But I remember my first, as an adult, one of my earliest tournaments in the UK. And I was watching a lot of Pride at the time, which was the big MMA show for those who are too young in MMA to have heard of Pride. But I was watching it. Vanderlei Silva was my favorite, the axe murderer. And he would, he'd be very intense. And I sort of tried to embody him. And, later on I would learn about optimal state of arousal stuff. But essentially, I completely overshot my arousal levels. The most I ever had, almost impressively, I was psyching myself up into a berserk rage. I had tunnel vision, no peripherals. I couldn't hear anything. And I ran out there and I got submitted instantly. And I was furious, punching the mat. The next tournament I went to, I did the opposite, and I was listening to classical music beforehand and meditating, and then I went in there and I was flowing and got my guard passed, and I got beaten there as well because I was too relaxed. So it's a really good way of teaching you the two sides of the spectrum, and then obviously worked on finding my way to the middle and getting that down.
Awesome. When you got the black belt, obviously then you're competing against other black belts, is that correct?
Yes, but also no. So I was competing against black belts from when I was purple belt. So obviously in no gi, especially back then, when we didn't really have belt divisions for no gi, it was just experience levels. Yeah, by the time I was purple belt, I was pretty high level in the UK. I qualified for ADCC as a purple belt when I was 20.
Oh, cool.
So I was one of the top guys in Europe as a purple belt. I won advanced division at Naga Europe. I won the British Open at black belt when I was a brown belt. So I was already competing at a black belt level. Essentially, I did a few super fight shows where I was submitting black belts as a purple belt and brown belt. So by the time I got my black belt, the black belt didn't mean it wasn't a it was just a ticket to compete in more tournaments against black belts. Right. It wasn't, for some people, the belt is, we recognize you as being this level. I didn't need someone to say we recognize you as being a black belt, because if you tap a black belt, you're like, okay, I don't give a shit. Like, you can tell me that I'm not a black belt, I don't care. It's kind of redundant at that point. So my brown to black took longer than it should have for a number of reasons. But it was frustrating. I was like, just you're holding me back. The gates closed. Let me out and let me go and compete against who I want to compete against. But
was that conscious holding back, or was that something that was just circumstantial?
Essentially, the person that I wanted to get my black belt from was in Brazil, and then he had a spate of illness where he wasn't able to come over, and then so that delayed it somewhat. And then, a very common thing is to hold people back at belts to compete at high level tournaments. But essentially, I got, basically offered, you can wait for Mauricio or Roger can give you a belt at the next grade. And I was just like, just give it to me. And in hindsight, that was obviously the right move to make, because, the other person would have been Mauricio, Roger's dad. But in hindsight, Roger's one of the best grapplers of all time, arguably the best grappler of all time. So actually having a belt from him is
pretty cool.
About as good a lineage as you can get. Yeah.
Just as a little sidestep, what I find really interesting with martial arts is grading systems and the belt systems, and it offers a real, almost a gamification of a sport and a graduation system that we don't see really in other sports. Do you think it's entirely positive, or what's your experience of the grading system?
Yes. Look, there's downsides to everything. I think that it helps people. Again, we go back to that thing we were talking about, that emotional investment. Some people don't care about the belts. Some people say they don't care about the belts, and they do. Some people say they don't care about the belts, and they really don't. For those people, it just doesn't matter. And if it doesn't matter, who cares? And there are some people who it really means a lot to. And this is especially true of the hobbyist people, the older gents or ladies, and people who aren't able to, quote unquote, prove themselves as much in the training room. For them, being acknowledged as a blue belt or purple or brown, of course black. For a lot of people, they have a goal of achieving their black belt. It's a nice thing to do in your life. And with jiu-jitsu, there's no stronger belt in the world than a jiu-jitsu black belt, because everyone knows that it's going to take you a lot longer than any other sport, any other martial art. So getting your jiu-jitsu black belt is an accomplishment, regardless of your competition credentials or anything like that. There's going to be 10 to 15 years of hard work consistently. So I think it's nice, but depends who it's for. It's relative to the individual. For a serious competitor, it doesn't matter. But for a hobbyist, it's a really nice, and I'm sure, like, I don't know, other sports kind of have, whether you're in the A team or B team, it's.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I think my feeling is also it's a genius business move, right? If you own a gym, like a commercial gym, there's no real graduation process, and you see people jump in, jump out all the time. But with something like BJJ, if people really dive in and they get the first couple of notches on the belt, all of a sudden it's like, I've got a ladder here, and it's kind of it's there in front of me. I've got this path I can follow, and in 15 years' time, if I stay here for 15 years, I'm going to get my black belt, which seems like a really smart move from the get-go.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's no shadow of a doubt that the belt system helps with retention. It can, I don't think it always helps with retention, because what you'll find a lot of people is, famously, we have blue belt-itis, which is you get your blue belt and boom, you disappear. You never come back. And I think that's what happens. That is a symptom of someone putting real emphasis on a belt, getting that belt, and then nothing changing, because it's just a piece of cloth that you're no better on the Monday after you got the belt than you were the Monday before you got the belt. You're not a different person. You just wear a different colored cloth to hold your gi together. So a lot of people, they put so much focus on getting this one thing, and then, because they're externally driven. And then once they have the thing, they go, oh, damn, 2 more years, 3 more years to the next belt, and they'll just quit. So that does happen a lot. But I think if you... You're going.
Sorry, mate, go
on. No, please.
I wanted to parallel this because I think it's such a key point for people in my audience especially, which is achieving a goal, putting so much stock into that goal and realizing that nothing really changed other than you succeeded in a goal, and then you have to reset and choose a different goal. And a lot of people, when they achieve the X goal, the handstand or whatever it might be, they get their 10 seconds and they're like, oh, I feel almost lost now. What's my gold star, my North Star, my focus point is no longer there. And I wonder, from your point of view, who has been through that process over and over again with bout after bout after bout, and then in all these other sports, what is your process? How do you work with goal setting and feeling intrinsically motivated or, emotionally engaged in a goal, but not having that as a weight on your back dragging you down? What is the balance for you?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. If you rely on external validation for things, and one, maybe you don't get it and you start to become disenfranchised by the idea, or two, God forbid you do get it and then you don't know what to do. It's the dog chasing the car. It doesn't know what to do once he grabs it. For me, jiu-jitsu wise, it wasn't an issue because I never cared about the belts. I cared about competing and winning, and the belts were all it was is, okay, now you can go and compete against purple belts, now you can go and compete against brown belt, et cetera, et cetera. And when I started doing more no-gi, almost that didn't matter. So the belts were only things, they were only limits, they weren't goals ever. But for other stuff, for a lot of people, they are. And I've had lots of goals outside of jiu-jitsu, with the strength stuff. And I think an important part of it is identifying with, the identity of someone who chases goals, not as someone who chases this one thing, So like a big goal of mine was to lift the Dinny stones. Once I lifted the Dinny stones, I was like, okay, what's next? Yeah. Like it's always what's next. Because if I go like my one goal in life, you can't say like my one goal in life is to do this one thing, because then if that happens, you got a problem. So I think you always need another goal in your mind. I've got 10 things that I want to do, and maybe hopefully I won't get all of them. I think that's the idea. There's always something next to work on.
Yeah.
What about you?
It reminds me of the anti-library. There's a guy called Nassim Taleb. He wrote Anti-Fragile.
Yeah.
And he, in the book, quotes, I forget the Italian philosopher's idea of the anti-library, which is basically he has this ginormous library at home with books that he's never going to be able to read. And it reminds him that he doesn't know everything, or he can't possibly understand and know everything. And it kind of almost keeps him humble, which I think's, the anti-goal is to have loads of goals. So you never quite achieve all of them.
Yeah, exactly. Like what goals do you have at the moment?
So actually I'm competing tomorrow. So my main goal the last 6 weeks is it's my first So long story short, I started to arm wrestle last year and got quite interested in actually, similar to you, I think the training parallels. I'm just interested in training. I love training. I love being physically active and grip strength, forearm, elbow health, and coaching that comes with that. All of the stuff I love. But one thing I always felt in my training that was more general was that it never had grounds to be tested. And climbing, to a certain degree, was the sport that I could test my physicality in a certain way. But I wanted something more. I wanted something a bit more combative and a bit more physically engaging. And arm wrestling was just something that kept coming up for me. And it was something that, with my uncles and my dad, I was always really motivated by. And whenever I was around other people that were willing to try, I'd always go for it. And I always got some positive feedback and genuine resonance from it. So last year, I quote unquote threw caution to the wind and accepted the weird choice to really specify into something super niche. And I entered a competition after just 6 weeks of kind of arm wrestling, and I came third in the national, like the amateur nationals, which was like a massive shock, which was great. But it now meant that I was then technically a pro in the UK. So after 6 weeks of training, I was like, well, now what do I do? And so we really went into into the training phase of, okay, well, what does it mean to be a pro, and what can we actually do to kind of push forward, and super simplified my training and dropped a lot of things that I was doing around the periphery. And tomorrow's the first event as a pro since the nationals back in November. So let's see if anything's actually worked. Yeah, I'm super stoked. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, best of luck with it.
Thanks, dude. Yeah, it's going to be great. It's going to be so good. Again, though, it's not... it's one of a multitude of goals that I've got.
So let's say you go tomorrow and you win the event tomorrow. What's the goal after?
So I've got then a super match then 6 weeks after that.
Okay, you win that.
Up. Yeah. Then I go to the professional nationals.
Yeah, you win that.
November. Exactly. And we go. And I've also got smaller goals that I've got in my mind around that. So it's, nail on the head. I think we always have to have that anti-goal of having too many goals to actually achieve them. And also like not getting upset if you don't. Right. Exactly. Because the likelihood is I'm not going to win tomorrow, and I have to, change a few things, and actually I'll be shown up for being a complete novice, really. And actually that's where I learn, and that's the beauty of it. And that's where a testing ground can be so powerful. And sometimes we get stuck in the, training by yourself in your garage for years on end, and you don't actually get to test the fruits of the labor and actually see what's working, what's not. But I was going to say that the skill of having loads of goals, I feel, especially coaching people, is being able to decipher and cut away the noise and actually choose then one to work on or two to work on at any one time. And I really love the modular approach of going, well, I've got these X goals. What in the next 6 to 12 weeks do I want to really dial into? And for me, I really try and pull, going back to our previous conversation on resonance, and I really try to pull on, okay, well, what am I really drawn to right now? And I'll push that until I feel like I want to change. And it's that kind of emotional process. And I wonder for you, you've just said you've got 10x goals. What is your process of working with them? Do you, set yourself a New Year's resolution? Do you just flow with it? Do you go day by day? What's your process?
Yeah, well, at the moment, I'm on the road. I'm traveling. I'm in Italy at the moment, but I've been away time has become a truly abstract concept for me. I don't know the days, but something like 2.5 months or something. And I'll be away for the foreseeable future. So no goals at the moment. I have these goals, but they're on hold. And I think that's also a big part of it is being able to, especially when you're someone who's been so goal focused and goal oriented, always had something that you're chasing, is actually being able to exist for a little bit without chasing anything, not getting closer to it, only getting further away from your goals. I had a goal, I guess my main goal over the last year or so has been to lift the inch dumbbell. I was trying to hammer it as hard as
Have
I
you
could.
managed yet?
No, I wasn't able to, and
Oh,
I
dude,
thought
I really
I
want to
was
try.
hoping. Yeah, I was hoping I was able to do it before I left to go away in February, but couldn't do it, and so I'm gonna have to wait till I get home and
Is that the
see.
70,
That's
78
78.
kilo
Yeah,
one? 78, yeah,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. So yeah, that's kind of, there's like a background itching of just go home. You don't need to travel anymore. Just go home and get your hands on the dumbbell and other things. Stone lifting is high up my priorities. There's some various stones around the world. Really the main physical goal for me has always been to do the Husserl, but that's a seriously hard event that will take a lot of training to do. Yeah, there's always something.
How do you treat being away on the road so much? Do you try to stay active, and do you have like a holiday routine, or are you just like, no, I'm in I'm in off season, I'm in relaxation mode?
Well, I can't do that because I'm not on holiday. I don't really know what I am. I guess I'm traveling, but it's not a holiday. It's too long for a holiday.
Yeah, yeah.
If you're away for a week or two, if you're away for a week and you train really hard, just take a week off.
Silly.
Really,
Yeah.
just take a week off. Just fucking enjoy
Yeah,
yourself. Like if you go 3 days and you just feel super sluggish, pop down to a local gym and get a pump on or go for a jog on the beach. You're like, just do something to make you feel better, but don't feel any guilt
Yeah.
for 1 or 2 weeks. But if you're away for 6 months and you just go, I'm just going to have pasta and gelato every day and I'm not going to exercise, then you end up feeling pretty shitty pretty quick. So I'm not being harsh on myself on how I train, but I'm making sure that I'm going to the gym. I'm trying to roll and gym once every destination because I'm traveling very quickly. I'm spending between like 3 and 6 days per location. So so I'm just trying to get it in there. But again, it's just not. I don't like traveling, which is funny for someone who's traveling for a significant part of the year. But I've never liked traveling. I travel quite a lot for work. I'm not. This is completely volunteered or optional traveling that I'm doing at the moment. But I've never liked it because I lose the control of my food and my training really, and you get this fear after 20 years of training that you're gonna get weaker or you're gonna get smaller or you're gonna whatever. You go, fuck, if you've been training for 20 years and you're scared that you're gonna get a little weaker or a little skinnier in 6 months and that stops you from traveling the world, that's pretty shitty, isn't it? It's pretty pathetic actually when you think about it. So for me, one of the big tests of this whole traveling thing for me was to force myself out of the comfort zone and to let go of that idea that I need to be this strong or this big or whatever, and just allow that. I know that in 6 months' time I'll be back to where I was before I left. Who cares?
Yeah. One big realization for me was being able to go away and accept that I might get a bit weaker.
Yeah.
And be like, okay, well, what is the joy? What is the most important part of any process for me? And it's the process, not the end product. And so if I'm a tiny bit further back or further away from the end product, it just means I get more
even
time
better
to enjoy the process again. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that change of that reframing of what am I doing this for, the ends or the means, is actually a huge reframing in my opinion. And I think a lot of people could do to do great in understanding, okay, well, if you just keep achieving things, it becomes empty because they become less meaningful because they're too easy, or they're just in your swag bag that you're dragging along that gets heavier and heavier. And actually, maybe that's not quite the meaningful process. I'd like to dive into more of your training because I think that's where we have this huge crossover, and I'm stoked to hear more about your grip sports. I'm yet to do any official grip sport competing, let's say, but I absolutely love to. What was your... Let's go back a bit. So obviously BJJ, full on BJJ, competing. At what point did you go, you know what, I actually need to do some general conditioning, some training outside of my sport?
Pretty early. So, a couple of years into training, you start training jiu-jitsu, you're going to get beat up. Doesn't matter who you are, what you are, you're going to get beat up for a little while.
Mm.
And you get better, and hopefully you stop getting beaten up. I got better, but the problem was I was 55, 60 kilos, and
Oh,
I'm
wow.
Yeah, I was a skinny kid.
How tall are you? I thought you were a big guy.
No, I'm 5'9". So
Ah,
on a good
okay.
day,
I was thinking, how did you get
with a
into
deep breath,
55
yeah.
kilos?
No, I was a skinny kid, and
Yeah.
so I was, I started training. I was probably closer to low 50s.
Mm.
So I was 55. Let's say I was 60 kilos, and I'm not performing to my skill level against people because they're 70, 75, 80 kilos. So I'm getting beaten up by bigger guys, even though I'm better than them, and this breeds frustration very quickly. So of course, luckily I'm aware that we have the capacity to change how big and strong we are. So I start looking towards doing some sort of gym work, which I'd never done prior to this point. So I started, Nick gave me a little workout that he does, and I did a few times, and yeah, so. And then my friend gave me a book called Dinosaur Training by a guy called Brooks Kubik. And I went through this book, and it became my Bible. And I still consider it to be the Bible. And that, again, it's that inspiration. It's a really cool book. I think I've recommended it, more than 1,000 times more than any other book I've ever read, because it is sort of the origin story of my physical training. But it's all about, the dinosaurs in dinosaur training is the old time strongmen, the Eugene Sandows, the Arthur Saxons, the George Hackensmiths. And, it's very hardcore, it's heavy, low reps, thick bar, and all of this stuff. And big focus on grip. And that's where I got into training, and I wrote out my program, and I started going to a commercial gym, and I kept reading the book, and it would always talk about, you don't want to be Chrome and Fernland, he would call it, these commercial gyms. He goes, you've got to be a garage gorilla. And I was like, okay, say less. So I bought a 2.5-inch handle barbell and 90 kilos of weights, cleared out as much space in the garage as I could, and I started working out there. And that's been the way ever since. And that's how I got into strength training. It was it's been a long time. It's been almost 20 years that I've been lifting weights now. And always with a big focus on grip, because my hands are naturally weak. I was a skinny kid. I'm weak. But in jiu-jitsu, that's your connection to the other person. If you train jiu-jitsu, chuck someone in jiu-jitsu for 6 months and pull them out and go, where do you wish you were stronger? They go, my hands. Make my hands stronger. I want to be able to hold on to the gear. I want to be able to hold on to, So you don't need to tell someone that they need strong grip for jiu-jitsu, especially gi jiu-jitsu. They know.
I come from a decade plus of climbing, and even in a sport that is so intrinsically focused on the hands and grip, no one actually talks about grip as a kind of, everyone talks about it as one thing. And I think you were one of the first people that I saw that was actually talking about grip as a multitude of various aspects, let's call them qualities.
Yeah.
And, even just kind of this versus the forearm flexion versus everything else that could go on. What was it about grip that pulled you in, and how did you begin to, I don't want to call it a system, but maybe you'd call it a system. How were you able to systematize grip training to the level that you have right now?
Yeah, well, I go pretty deep in everything that I do. My friends may say a bit extra. I'm a bit extra. Same with jiu-jitsu. I went deep in on the jiu-jitsu stuff, and I did the same when I was getting into the strength training, and obviously there was more of a focus towards grip. Always has been. I focus on full body training, but the grip has always been, for me, the most intriguing. Because I think it's the strongest, it's the most bang for your buck you can get for so much stuff. And the grip requirements in the same way we were talking before, the physicality requirements is based on the level of constraint within a sport. So if you have a very constrained sport, the physicality will be more specific. And if you have a very broadly constrained sport, the physicality will have to be more general. And jiu-jitsu is very, as we already said, it's not very constrained at all. So you're, especially grip requirements, and if you're doing gi and no gi as well, different materials,
Very
you
different.
double it, you know. So there's just so many different ways to train. With climbing, there are lots of different ways, but it's still far more constrained than jiu-jitsu is, mainly because the wall isn't shaking itself trying to get you off of it. That really changes the game.
But also in climbing, people still see, the Gen Pop will still see grip as a thing. I just hang and I'll improve my grip.
Yeah.
As opposed to I have a different formation of my hand and a different way that my musculature is actually working to do a pinch or a kind of slope or an awkward crimp or whatever may be going on. And I feel like gi versus no gi is a great example of, okay, I have to, I'm not even sure on the technical terms that you would use, but grab gi versus pinch someone's arm, for example, or clasp someone's wrist. Like there's different hand positions that you're going to have to train to get strong in and actually be able to be dominant on the mat. So then, do you have, if we move towards your work, do you have categorizations of what you'd call the terminology and how you train, for example, an open hand gripping motion versus a closed hand versus?
Yeah. I mean, you're almost there. So like you can break it down into hand and wrist. For hand, you have crush, which is that sort of gripper closing that so many people know, like the continuous movement through a range of motion and having strength through that entire range. Closed hand support, just holding on to something, that where your fingers can fully wrap around. It's your barbell, that's your lapel. You have open hand support where your hands can't grab all the way around. So that's grabbing onto your wrist. That's thick bar training. You have vertical gripping, which is usually open hand, but sometimes closed hand support, but with the wrist in a fully deviated position, which you're going to have, you're climbing a rope or you're pulling a rope or you're grabbing someone's wrist.
Yeah, right.
So in a lot of positions, some people can be very strong with their hand in a neutral position. You put it into deviation and the hand becomes weak. But it's a very important, strength to have. You lift the sword out of the stone, you better be able to pull vertical bar, all of that stuff. Exactly. Gotcha. You have finger strength, which is more of your climbing stuff. This is more strengthened by the ligaments and tendon stuff, but flexion in the middle and base knuckle, in the top and middle knuckle, and having the strength here. This is going to be your crimping stuff.
Crimp work.
You have then cupping, which is like a flexion of the fingers from the base knuckles. In arm wrestling, cupping and hooking are basically the same thing. For me, cupping is like making a cup with your hand, and hooking is the wrist flexion. So then you go into wrist, and then you have, and then of course pinch with the thumb opposing the fingers. Those are the main ones. You still have different ones. This sort of claw position here, where you're like grabbing onto a ball or something, and then you have the wrist, which is of course flexion, extension, and radial and ulnar deviation. And then technically, I always include in the wrist, but it's technically not a movement of the wrist; it's of the elbow, but supination and pronation as well. So that's sort of, you have your two categories and you have your different variations. And if you train all of those, you're gonna have a pretty well-rounded grip.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
And you don't have to train them all. You don't have to train them all, but understanding in the same way, what are you doing today? Legs, which is fine. But you go, okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to do my hamstrings. I'm going to do my quads. I'm going to do a squat. I'm going to do a lunge. I'm going to do abduction. You have the different ranges of motion.
Yeah. Do you have a grip day or hand day or wrist day? How does that work for you?
Depends on the situation, but generally, no. You can get, I'll work in grip with most of my training days. Occasionally, I'll have like a day where I've got some time or I want to work on this, and maybe I'll go out there and I'll just do, I'll focus more on grip stuff than other stuff, but not necessary. You can, if you want to be really efficient with your time, 2 or 3 grip exercises a day, in my opinion. If you're just a gem pop, you're trying to get stronger, you're not competing in arm wrestling or you're not competing in grip sport. Grip sport guys are going to do just grip days. There's some people, grip sport guys, that will only train grip. They're not going to train anything else. So for them, it's different. They'll have a pinch day and a pinch day and a open hand support day and a whatever vertical bar day, inch day, whatever. But for most people, you can do 2 or 3 grip exercises, 1 or 2 hand and 1 or 2 wrist per session that you're doing other stuff. And you can do that supersetted in between full body exercises for the biggest, the most efficient use of your time, or you can just do it at the end of the workout. You can chuck in 2 or 3 grip exercises and very, very easily done.
Yeah, nice. What's the frequency like? Because what we found through the arm wrestling, like cupping type work for the forearm, is that actually similar to the calves, the forearms do pretty well with a high frequency, high volume, lower intensity process initially.
Yep.
And then depending on the goal of, are you trying to build hypertrophy or strength, then you kind of adapt the rep ranges. Have you found similar or different?
Yeah, the forearms have an incredible capacity for recovery for obvious reasons. We're using them as humans every single day, and if you never worked out your forearms and you do a forearm session, then you're going to be absolutely wrecked for a couple of days. But if you're an iron worker, or you're working on an oil rig, or you're scaffolding, and you do that every single day, the forearms have to recover. So there's a huge amount of blood flow to the forearms. And you can, in theory, train your grip every single day on lower intensity. I don't think it's necessary to do that, but you can do it.
Do you have a preferred frequency per week?
Yeah, 3 or 4 times a week.
That's good. Yeah,
3 or 4 times a week I usually train it, but I'm not going crazy on it. I'm not going crazy on it. And also you can make an argument that you train jiu-jitsu on the other days and you're training your grip a little bit there as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's one thing to consider for everyone is what is the, especially if you're doing a sport like climbing, BJJ, even arm wrestling, if the sport has a huge demand on your grip strength and your grip, then of course you have to see the cross.
You've got to factor that in. Yeah.
We keep talking about climbing. Arm wrestling.
Yeah.
And I asked you already about the UFC and if you'd ever decided to kind of push towards that.
Yeah, would they ever arm wrestle?
Yeah, because right now I feel like your training, your physicality, everything leads you towards the table. It's one of the fastest growing sports in the world right now.
Yeah, I think I will compete in arm wrestling at some point.
Yeah,
I think I will. I said many years ago that I'd compete in arm wrestling after I finished with jiu-jitsu. And I guess I haven't competed in jiu-jitsu for a while, so maybe now's the time. Not right now, but I'm away. But maybe next year, who knows? I don't know what's going to happen.
Come down, we'll teach you.
Absolutely, mate. I'd love to. And I really love it. I will compete in arm wrestling at some point. I don't think I will take it very seriously long term. I'd probably give myself 6 months of training and do 1 or 2 comps. Kind of for the same reason that I wouldn't do MMA, which is you get brain damage with the MMA. And pretty fucked up elbows from the arm wrestling, and maybe I've got a better base than most for that, but you go hard with that. All of the top arm wrestlers have a little bit of elbow issues. I think.
My perspective is.
Yeah, but you're a climber, mate. How long you climb for?
Yeah, a decade. Yeah.
If you climb for 10 years, you climb for 10 years. Your connective tissue, climbing is the best. Climbing is the best base for grip sport. Yeah, I truly believe that.
Also, for arm wrestling, calisthenics or gymnastic strength training is amazing for the connective tissue of the elbow.
Yeah.
So I think we've got a kind of double whammy there. I was really into gymnastic rings and kind of muscle ups, one arm chin ups, and kind of connective tissue wise. That's really.
Well, you could say, climbing's kind of a form of calisthenics, isn't it?
Yeah, in a way. I was trying to use my feet more and more. I'm a heavy guy, so for me, I was trying to get into the feet. But of course, you have to be strong.
But I'll do it.
I'd love to see you in arm wrestling.
When I'm back, I'll come down and we'll do a session.
I'll come up. I want to come to see the game.
We'll do both. I'll come down, you come up, and we'll sort it out. Yeah, but I'm definitely up for it.
You know Yves Gravaille, right? The Canadian guy. Yeah. Have you ever met him in person or seen some of the?
I haven't. No. I've seen something incredibly strong. One of the strongest grip guys out there for sure. Again, climbing base,
arm wrestling.
Yeah.
So he just won, I think, or came second in the Canadian nationals already.
Wow.
He's a phenom.
Crazy.
But man, I really think he'd do a really great job at it.
Yeah.
I think it'd be.
Yeah, I just got to get my pro.
Really
I played around. I got to do a lot more pronation stuff. That's the secret. My wrist, my flexion strength is strong.
I was going to
say,
but
I got to be able to pronate.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That'd be awesome, man. That'd be so cool. Have you ever done much like hammer curling or work kind of like lifting in the vertical? You said you did some grip stuff in the vertical plane.
Yeah.
Kind of like thumb to shoulder.
Yeah.
Have you played around a lot with like
what you'd call riser?
Flexion? Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, a little bit. I like to do hammer lever and stuff with it, but I haven't do. I guess in arm wrestling you have your metrics of like how much you can lift in a riser pickup, and I haven't tested that.
I think the sport would be hugely benefiting of your experience and what you could bring to the table. It's such a niche sport, the same as parkour or whatever back in the day. It's like the more people that come into it with different perspectives, the better the sport is through that perspective of training. So
maybe, you know what, I'll see. I'm potentially going to continue traveling next year, but also potentially not. If I don't, then
we're in
2027. Put me in a.
If I've still got elbows
a competition,
at that point, we'll do it.
There we go.
I feel like a lot of the old strongmen. So you've got Terry Holland's coming over to professional arm wrestling. Lawrence Shaw,
Brian Shaw,
obviously Brian Shaw just had a bit. Did you watch the match?
I didn't watch the match. No, he's a beast though.
Are you aware of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was very interesting. Kind of, I thought about bringing it up earlier on, but he was someone who comes in as a very cognitively focused person. He's incredibly meticulous in his preparation. Brian.
Oh yeah, Brian's probably my favorite strongman of all time. He's awesome.
Amazing guy. I really love what he's bringing to the sport. I think his whole perspective on life is fantastic. The way, even his video he put out recently on after his loss and his perspective on his loss, it's beautiful. But yeah, he got beat really badly, man. He came in, obviously huge pressure, big guy, managed to beat Eddie Hall in a kind of close match last time out. Huge hype. They go to Germany and he faced off against Leonidas Arcona, who is a monster. He's only 3-4 years into the sport and he just destroyed him. Yeah, I think it's so interesting how you talked a bit about kind of emergent arm wrestling versus struggling through emergent rolling.
Yeah,
and just kind of having things emerge and things happening for you versus being overly cognizant and actually getting stuck in the mud. And it seems.
You think maybe Brian got stuck in the mud a little bit?
I really feel like it because his physicality and the metrics suggest that he would, of course, win. But sport is so not about metrics.
Yeah,
there's something there that I think is so beautiful in sports like MMA, BJJ, arm wrestling, climbing, that metrics can't overcome.
That's the technique, though. That's the technique.
It is, man. It is. Yeah, I love it. Dan, I don't want to take too much of your time on holiday, but as I said at the start, is there anything towards the end of the conversation that you'd like to kind of bring up or just kind of mention or talk about? Then I'm more than happy to do so.
No, I think I'm pretty open. I think we've had a good convo, and I don't know. I'm easy.
My one goal was to get you into arm wrestling, so I feel like I've achieved that now.
I got to go back and test my arms and feel if they still got the strength in them. Yeah.
Let me know. I'm more than happy to discuss some ideas.
Now, once I'm back, we'll hook up and we'll see how it goes, and I can see how far off I am.
I've actually got one question for you. So you have possibly the UK or Europe's largest kind of grip strength palace.
Yes.
How long has that taken to slowly curate over time? That's a behemoth.
Yeah, probably like 15, 16, 17 years. It's been a while.
Wow.
Maybe longer,
Is it
actually.
official? Is it official that the biggest, most what would you call it?
Subjective metric, isn't it? Yeah, it's subjective. I don't know. All I can tell you is that Juji Mufu said it's the best home gym that he's been to. I need that in a plaque.
What else?
I think I will actually get that on a plaque. That's quite funny.
I think you should. Yeah, that's pretty big. To have
but
Juju fly over just for your
Yeah.
grip, then that's pretty special.
no, there's some really cool places in the UK, and indeed all over the world with some really cool grip setups. You've got Commando Temple down in South London. You got obviously
Yeah,
David
right, yeah.
Horn's what's he call it? The grip. Oh, damn, what does he call it?
Dungeon
the shed or
something.
something? Yeah, that place that's got its own unique special character and charm to it, because you've got the history and all of David's crazy stuff. It's like a mad scientist lab. But yeah, I'm pretty proud of that cave and my cave, and missing it at the moment. Going to this anytime fitness,
getting dusty,
and not having a good time. Yeah, but I'll get my hands on that stuff again soon.
Let's go, man. So I wish you all the best of the trip.
Thank you,
My
brother.
goal for next year, one more goal for next year, is to sock you up with Juju Mufu in an arm wrestling match.
Okay.
I know he's.
Yeah, we never locked up actually, which was funny.
Really,
we should have done that. I'm trying to get.
We have to keep it.
Maybe
for next year.
So when I got the technique down a little bit.
East versus West. Or West
maybe
West.
that might be the way to do it. Oh man, I'd hate to compete against Juju. I love that guy.
No man, that's the perfect first one. If you love the guy,
maybe
no pressure.
Maybe.
I think with your profile, it'd be such a special thing to introduce.
Yeah.
So
maybe
cool.
We'll have to think about it. We'll see how it goes.
Mate, I'm planning it already. I'm there.
He's writing the poster out.
Yeah. Robert Baxter. Dude, thank you so much for the chat. I really, really appreciate your time. The guys will really enjoy this.